Loser X nurse.
How old are you?
Loser X nurse. Loser X nurse. You don't have a job as a nurse anymore,
My
do you?
3-year-old has more
loser
respect
X
for
nurse.
herself.
You're the loser X nurse. You're the loser X nurse.
Have you ever heard?
Look who couldn't keep her job because she doesn't know anything about science.
She didn't keep her job because she didn't get the jab.
Yeah, she's an idiot.
Damage.
Look at the studies.
She does.
That's
Nobody
not true.
cares about what a loser X nurse has to say. Yeah, nobody cares what a loser X nurse has to say.
Until they're 25.
You're a loser X nurse. You're a loser X nurse.
Yeah. Why is
You
that?
lost your job.
Is that not a reasonable position?
No, it's not. You're a loser.
She's just saying wait a little bit so you don't regret it.
Loser X nurse. Loser X nurse. No, you don't. Loser X nurse. Loser X nurse. So when you became a loser X nurse. Loser X nurse. Your vaccination. Loser X nurse. 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 Loser X nurse.
This is a real person, by the way. This is an actual person we're going to be talking about today.
Loser X nurse. No to the children. That's all. You can do what.
I mean, it's totally sane, right? It's not at all like the inmates have taken over the prison, like the patients have taken over the asylum. And for those of you who may or may not be aware, the quote loser ex nurse, I've had her on the channel, lost her job, unless I'm mistaken, for not getting the jibby jab. The jibby jab, which is back in the news because apparently AstraZeneca might have lied when they said certain things that happened could not or would not or did not or were not happening. Loser ex nurse because people were coerced into taking a jibby jabby that they didn't want. My body, my choice. Justin Trudeau supports women's rights when they do what he says. And that, I'll call her a nutbag. I think she's a nutbag. I think she's a toxic, foul, bad person. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think she gets to be locked up in jail, denied bail for non-violent protest or not, for very serious conditions. But taunting, it's totally normal. Even if you disagree with someone, what you do is you sit there and repeat the same thing over and over and over again, shouting and shouting in their face, rubbing in their face that they lost their job because they refused to submit to an experimental gene therapy jibby jab that we are now seeing. The people who were raising the alarms at the beginning might have been more right than the people telling us it was safe and effective before they knew it was safe and effective, and even after they knew it might not be quite so safe and effective. And with that said, holy sweet crab apples, it segues perfectly into our sponsor of the day for those people out there who were in fact coerced, for whatever the reason, into taking the jibby jab. Maybe you were coerced because of your job. Maybe you had nagging parents who were also convinced by the propaganda, safe and effective. You want to see grandma, don't you? And you thought you were doing the right thing at the time, and now you're concerned about the potential health implications because we're seeing it in real time. Google AstraZeneca for those of you who are living in a cave somewhere. If you're nervous about it and you took it, and those little things called spike proteins that Dr. Malone was talking about from day one that some schnooks out there like myself didn't fully appreciate what they were saying. If you took it and you're nervous, fortunately, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Harvey Reich, and the chief medical board of the wellness company have been among the leading experts in treating COVID and jibby jab injury. The most important question Dr. McCullough gets in his clinical practice daily is, how do I get this out of my body? The wellness company doctors continue to scour the source literature for evidence of products that can aid the body in breaking down the spike protein, the toxic substance at the root of almost all problems related to the jibby jab. And Dr. McCullough notes, out of all the available therapies I have used in my practice, I believe nattokinase, I can't pronounce it, but it's nattokinase and related peptides hold the greatest promise for patients at this time. And by the way, I've had this discussion with Dr. Drew, who's actually still practicing. And they all say the same thing. It is called nattokinase. Nattokinase, you know what it is. Anyhow, bottom line, the wellness company, the makers of the emergency contagion kit, are also making the spike kit. And if you're nervous about what damage you might have done to your body, if you want to just take care of your body, jabbed or not, they've got the spike kit, and it will help you along, be healthy, recuperate. And the doctors who were the ones right from the beginning, correct from the beginning, raising all of the alarm bells from the beginning, have designed a product that they're selling. TWC, geez Louise, I'm going to screw up. I can't see the address. My eyes are going. TWC.health/Viva. And you can they've got the emergency contagion kit, which has a bunch of medications. It's only available in the US, by the way, just everybody know that. And you can get the spike kit, the spike treatment kit, which will help those of you who are concerned with what you might have done to your body, and will help those of you who might not be concerned because you didn't do it, but it's still the thing to do, healthy and treat your body like the temple it is, not like the experimental Petri dish that they taught us it was. You go to twc.health/Viva, promo code Viva, and you'll get 10% off and free shipping. And thank the fine folks at the Wellness Company. Oh, I saw Caryma in the backdrop before. And I said, you know, like, people are going to watch that video and say, she looks jabbed. And I say, well, I got it. We might have the cure for that. Hashtag joke. No medical advice, no legal advice, no election fortification advice. But today, there will be no legal advice and there will be no medical advice. I'm going to move my footstool here. But we will be talking about what the hell is going on in Canada. What the hell is going on up in Canada? If you don't know who Dena Sharif is, you're going to know by the end of this. I briefly got into it with Caryma beforehand, but I said, I told our locals community, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, where we should be simultaneously live. We're live on Rumble, Viva Frei. We are live on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, where we have such an above average community. Encryptus from our community is correcting me in real time. It's pronounced nattokinase. 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 All that I can see when I see that is Japanese. It sounds like a Scotch Suntory. It's in the mix mainly for its ability to break up clots. It is in the mix mainly for its ability to break up clots. I remember Dr. Drew talking about it for a while. Everyone was correcting me in locals. Nattokinase. Okay. vivabarneslaw.locals.com, and we'll see if we can get some questions there, exclusive questions afterwards. I saw my name highlighted. I just got to thinking, even Viva Frei's username in stream contains a typo, so he doesn't pick favorites, at least, says N. Spence. All right, now, Caryma is in the backdrop. If you don't know who Caryma is, I can't not blame you. I had her on, I think, well, hold on. Caryma, you've been on at least twice now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And maybe even 3 times. I was going to present you. You're an actual practicing attorney, which is going to be very relevant for where this story goes. But for those who missed the last 2 or 3 times we've spoken in real time, tell us who you are.
Thanks. Yes, so I am a lawyer, and I am also a journalist. I document protests primarily, so expressions of political dissent or engagement in the streets, and that has kind of led me down some interesting paths. That's why I'm here today. And yeah, that's the gist of it.
Caryma, do me a favor. Lift up your computer for 1 second. Okay, now talk again.
Hi, can you hear me better now?
It's vibrating. There's something. You're not using a mic by any chance, eh?
I am not vibrating.
Yeah, like when you talk, it goes. Maybe hold on. Let me see what Locals says. If they see Locals, do you hear any audio when Caryma speaks? Or maybe see, now I don't hear anything, but it's when okay, it doesn't matter. Let's see. We'll see what they say. So Caryma Sa'd, you live in the hellhole that is Ottawa?
No, I actually live in Toronto. I used to live in Ottawa. That's where I went to law school and did my undergrad. And I was there throughout the convoy and go back fairly frequently because, as you can imagine, as the nation's capital, there are some pretty notable protests that take place.
I was going to say, by the way, you don't live in Ottawa hellhole. You live in the other hellhole. You got the hellhole and you got the butthole. Toronto is the butthole of Canada.
Toronto's for sure the butthole.
By the way, people are saying it's feedback, so you might be too close to a wall or something. But if we can't figure it out, you don't happen to have a mic. You don't have not a lapel, but an earbud or anything.
No, I did not have one. Oh, that's terrible.
No, hold on. It actually sounds a little better now.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. It was close to a wall, so let's see if that.
Yeah, we might have been having something vibrates when she speaks.
Is this better? Good.
That's actually much better.
Well, there you go.
Okay, it's not perfect, but the perfect shall not be the enemy of the good. So you studied in Ottawa. You are a practicing attorney. I've learned my lesson not to ask women their ages, but how long have you been practicing for?
I've been practicing since 2016.
Hey, a baby. You went behind the ears, and now you're in the thick of the most crazy stuff on earth. Okay, cool. So, I mean, how do we get started? I mean, for those who don't know the players in this story, the bottom line, and let me just bring up the arrest document, or at least what the Ottawa police published. For those who don't know who Dena Sharif is, and I said it feels like gossip a little bit in a dirty way, not like a productive way, because like Dena Sharif is not a Brian Stelter. She's not she's not a January 6er, but she's well known on the Ottawa protest scene. I think she's certifiably mentally unwell, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm saying that to say like she's clearly not well. But that doesn't mean that whatever is happening to her that I have serious questions about should be justified. She's a serial protester. She's at all the protests, but she's not an innocent babe in the woods. She is a provocateur and sometimes engages in not just constitutionally protected protest, but arguably assault. And I'll pull up one of those videos. But so give us a rundown as to who Dena Sharif is.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the serial protester. I like to call them perpetual or perennial protesters. And what I mean by that is there is a certain subset of individuals who will show up for different causes in different cities and consistently be at the forefront. And there is just something very odd, I suppose, about this. And it's something I've observed because I myself will travel across the province of Ontario and at some point realize that there were patterns in who keeps showing up and who is always at the center of chaos. And Dena Sharif is consistently at the center of chaos. And apart from her sort of on the ground protest activities, there is also an element of online quote unquote activism that she engages in. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's, I think, the sort of core thing to understand is that she is always placing herself at the front, regardless of the cause, and sometimes in ways that are contradictory.
She has been at the forefront of all trans rights, or at the very least opposing the education, not indoctrination protests, the vaccine mandate protests. Well, my question has always been, I don't want to know any personal information that's not public. My only question is, I've seen her at all these protests. I've been watching the videos, and I was at Ottawa, but I don't think I saw her at Ottawa. My question is like, what does she do for a living that enables her to take weekends and days and go, protest indefinitely? I know that in one video she suggested or said that she's paid by Trudeau, and I don't know if it was tongue in cheek or if it was, a hot mic. But does she have a job, or does she get paid for this?
It definitely was not a hot mic. I think that she was being facetious about being paid by Trudeau. And this is publicly available information. She runs a property management company, so sort of a glorified rent collector.
But so she's able to maintain a job. She's an employee, or is it her?
No, it's her own company. So I think that gives her the flexibility to take off and consistently be on the streets.
Well, I can tell you this: if she collects rent the way she protests, people will pay her just to get her off their front porch. Holy cows! If that's the rent collector, but just to give an example here, because I was saying, look, in all my experiences, I've seen her maybe once or twice. I think it was at Ottawa over the summer. I've never seen her do anything violent that could even rationalize how she's still being detained without bail. But you flipped me a link that is a little bit different, going back to those whistle things. Now I know who some of the people are in this, but this looks like it's at a Palestinian protest, and we see this. Just to explain, look at this. Now, those things are, I don't want to say rape whistles, but they are emergency whistles, this thing right here. And that kid is her kid.
Yes.
And she's quite clearly now using that kid. First of all, she's responsible for the acts of her kid, but she's quite clearly using that. I've said it before. She's using that as a weapon. And there's no question that bloody decibel whistle, it says it on the instructions. You're not supposed to point it at people. You're not supposed to use it within, what does it say on the instructions? We covered this with Joel Harden, like within 2 meters of something of ears.
Yeah, so it's a dual function, right? There is the safety device element to it. So in the event of, an attack, it's meant to deter someone from being close to you. But it was originally invented as a referee whistle. So specifically designed to make noise over and above what the crowd is doing, and in such a way that the referee themselves isn't impacted. Because when you have a traditional whistle that you're blowing, because it's so close and it's inescapable for the referee, it affects their ears. So this is specifically designed, the person who is using it has a different experience with the sound than, where it's pointing. And so when you are pointing it, and particularly if you're aiming it at someone's face or ears, it has the ability to cause profound and permanent damage. And the instructions on the website, I don't think they contemplate using it in this way, because when it talks about, is there a safety risk in using this, it says no, because you're just going to press it for, a second or 2 seconds, and then the noise stops. But when it's used in this way, a sustained, prolonged blow directed at someone, absolutely, it's an assault.
I'm gonna look. I know you're still a practicing attorney, so you're not at liberty to call raging pieces of shit. I have that liberty now, and I'm going to use it. This is the one where, if you don't know who the individual on the left is, he's a raging piece of shit, and he's also a pathological liar of the highest order, in that he exploits of alleged marginalized communities so that he can fabricate fake hate crimes against himself, use it as a sword and a shield, and use it to demonize an otherwise peaceful protest. And he hides behind masked goons who use this tool as a weapon. And he smirks like a smug piece of shit. I'm sorry, that's Joel Harden, by the way, in case anybody doesn't know who he is. A member of the NDP. Lied about being the victim of a hate crime, taking a punch to the face for trans kids. And he's hiding and grinning with a poop-eating grin behind a masked goon who's pointing it, Caryma, at your face. Look at that face. He's so proud. That's Joel Hart. That's a member of Canadian government. Oh yeah, literally hiding behind the flag. And this is Caryma, with more patience and tolerance than most people on earth would possibly have. So that's who Joel Harden is, and that's what it looks like when that device is used as a weapon. And Joel Harden is a terrible person. Now, I forgot what the purpose of where I was going to go after that diatribe, but I feel a little better now. So that was
if
Sharif.
I could, just on the point of weapons and criminal law, I see a lot of comments from people who say those are the same whistles that Ottawa crossing guards use. There's nothing wrong with the whistle. And that may well be true, but practically anything, if you use your imagination, can become a weapon. And the criminal law allows for that. There's no, there are certain types of weapons that are understood to only be weapons, right? If you're talking firearm, for example. But practically anything can be a weapon, and that would include these electronic whistles.
I'm trying to find the tweet because I had the tweet. It said the manufacturer, I can only get it in the Google search results. The manufacturer suggests that it's only for short blasts and it's not to be done near people's heads.
And the manufacturer, really, because I've reached out to them for comment over the past year, flagging for them that there is an issue in the way that their device is being used, that it's almost a fad among protesters, that they purchase them for one another, that it's a trend, and disappointingly, they have not reacted to that at all. And so anytime a product is used in a way that it's not supposed to be, and the instructions aren't explicit about that, there's a potential liability issue.
It's
and sorry, one more thing about this, which I thought was kind of funny. So these are Fox 40s, the red whistle that you were seeing. That's the company that produces them. It's a Fox 40 whistle. And the founder of this company, he also happens to run a trucking company called Fluke, of all things. And during the convoy, the company was pretty vocal from an anti-convoy perspective. So there is an irony here that kind of all the noise on either side of the protest divide seems to originate with trucks. Just a little fun tidbit there.
I still can't get over Joel Harden lied about being the victim of a hate crime, is caught on camera literally using a masked goon as an assaulter on, I don't do the whole identity politics, but if one were to, a woman sitting there, and he's so proud, hides behind the pride flag, irony, and he's still in parliament, and that little piece of garbage blocked me on Twitter, but I would have blocked me too, because I'm a constant reminder of his disgusting shame. Now, bringing it back to the whistle, we saw Dena Sharif with her kid, who many people are saying is a victim of child abuse in this chat, allowing her kid to use it, and then joining her kid and using it as a weapon. So when I say I've never seen Dena do anything other than be just the most disgusting person on earth, I didn't see anything like that, but I've seen that now. So that's who Deana Sherif is. Serial protester. She has a gang. There's a bunch of them. They do it, and more power to them if they do it legally, but apparently they aren't. She was arrested over the weekend or last week. And let me just bring up the video, which appears to be, I'm not sure if this is the video for assault with the megahorn, as I'll read in the charging, but this is a video that someone recorded. Sharif, sorry, Caryma, do you know who that kid is? Not by name, but is he also a known protester on the other side?
No, I don't recognize him as a regular on the circuit. And as we can see in that video, clearly, sometimes there are two wrongs at play. So you see the kid walking into the megaphone, sort of advancing in that way, but then you see the adult in the situation, and really forcefully push back, right? So,
Here you see he moves into it and it goes back a little bit. There you go. It goes back and then she pushes it away and then he slaps it away.
Yes, exactly. So that's probably not the most compelling piece of, evidence against Dena. At that same rally, though, she did grab a woman by the hair and drag her several feet. And then afterwards...
I didn't see that either. I knew that there was a fight with Dena at another protest where there were two women grabbing each other's hair, and you never know who starts what at that point.
No, that was the same day. That was the same on that day.
Oh, this is an older video that you just got.
Yeah, so that was June 9th of 2023. The incidents that she's presently charged with all happened on April 15th, 2024. So these are fairly recent events. It's interesting because there's this whole litany of charges, and it was a day of chaos, it seems, because it didn't all happen together. There were separate incidents.
So if I'll just read it very briefly, but this is the Ottawa Police hate unit, which I'm interested in knowing how the hate plays into this. In the afternoon, the individual, that being Dena Sharif, was taking part in another pop-up demonstration when the victim attempted to walk near the group of demonstrators to get to their destination. An argument ensued with that individual during which she assaulted the victim with a handheld sound amplifier. Oh, that's not a bull. Is that the whistle or is that a bullhorn? Sound amplifier has to be a bullhorn.
It does not have to be a bullhorn. She has two weapons of choice that she's used pretty consistently. And on the first anniversary, actually, of the convoy, she was there to counter protest. And on national news, it was broadcast that she hit two people in the face in separate incidents with her megaphone. She has also used the electronic whistle. There is a publication ban. So to discuss sort of the specifics that were presented at the bail hearing, I can't do that. But she has sort of multiple sound amplifying devices that she uses to violent ends.
And I'll just read this. This is definitely public because it's on the Ottawa Police. Finally, in the evening hours, the accused followed a different victim from a religious event while shouting hateful messages and assaulting them with a handheld sound amplifier. All victims sustained minor physical injuries. Dena Sharif has been identified and charged with assault. Police officer, well, that's where you get into trouble, with the intent to prevent an arrest, obstruct a peace officer in the execution of their duty. Assault, the duty is the joke. Assault with a weapon ×2, possession of a weapon dangerous to the public, harassment by threatening conduct, hate motivated, intimidation by disorderly following. Okay, I'll ask, and you please tell me if you can't answer. The hate aspect, I take for granted that it's not directed against Christians, but maybe it is. Are we allowed knowing if it was directed against a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew?
So the Ottawa Police did not include that information in their release. So it is not publicly available information.
Let me see if I can Google while you talk. All right. So I don't want to get you in trouble because you are still governed by the rules of well, whatever. People can go after you in ways they can't go after me. Say whatever you can say that will not get violate any publication ban. She gets arrested. Mm-hmm. The hearing is scheduled for Sunday, during which, this is all public because I know it, gay porn was blasted over the Zoom meeting because someone got access to a computer, or at least had their computer given access to during the hearing, and then they shut everything down, and that's when the public got slapped with a publication ban. So now it's all going to happen in darkness.
Sort of. So I'll start by saying that publication bans are fairly common in bail proceedings in Canada. There's a specific provision of the criminal code, and basically it's meant to protect the accused from being tried in the court of public opinion based on information that's presented at the bail hearing. Because at a bail hearing, it's not quite the same level of evidence that you would see at trial. Pretty much anything goes as long as there's a reasonable foundation. And so it's not atypical for defense counsel to invoke Section 517 so that there's a publication ban. So the porn and the publication ban are not necessarily linked, but the porn is noteworthy because many people, almost 200 people, were tuning in through Zoom. So this, you're able to observe virtually what's happening. And there was someone who, managed to raise their hand, and that brought them to the forefront of kind of the list of participants. And then from their device, they broadcast several different clips simultaneously of very explicit, horrific, pornographic acts. And there was a loud noise that was accompanying it. And shortly after, right, this ran for a few seconds. I don't know if the court clerks were presumably taken aback, didn't know what to do, and the room just shut down entirely. And then what happened after is people struggled to get back online, didn't know when to join back in. Many people were stuck in the waiting room. And some people who were kind of in the waiting room purgatory and then eventually let back in did so, and then weren't aware of the publication ban. So information was shared publicly that shouldn't have been. So the whole sort of proceeding was very messy.
She was arrested on Friday or Thursday?
On Saturday.
On Saturday. So she's arrested on Saturday. She's detained and has a bail hearing scheduled for Sunday, which is, I didn't know that they scheduled it for Sunday. The publication ban, was it issued right from the arrest or only at the hearing on Sunday?
Only at the hearing on Sunday, and pretty much once her matter was actually called. Okay. And it's, not normal to have bail on the weekend unless you are arrested on the weekend. So you have a constitutional right to appear in court within 24 hours of arrest. And so every jurisdiction is supposed to have what's called a wash court, so weekends and statutory holidays, because people get arrested at inconvenient times.
Well, I was going to say, and this is where, as much as I think I loathe, and rightly so, Dena, like when Tamara Leach was arrested, I think she had to wait at least 4 or 5 days before even getting before a judge for the bail hearing, if I'm remembering correctly. So just the idea, she got arrested on a Saturday, has the bail hearing on a Sunday. Now, I was going to say tongue in cheek or almost quasi-humorously, we know that it wasn't as though it might have been one of the court staff's computer that they had porn left open on their computer or anything?
I don't think so. I do think, though, that this type of situation, if it happened in the early pandemic when everyone was still getting used to Zoom and figuring out what functions were available, it would be shocking, but not altogether surprising. The fact that it happened, in 2024, it raises serious questions about courtroom management and, what safeguards weren't in place and why.
You have more, I'll say you have more legal experience with this than I do, because I never did criminal law. And we are now seeing gag orders like issued almost as the rule and not as the exception. But you said earlier, they're quite common under Canadian law. The publication bans, I've never been involved in this, so I never come across them and don't know. But it seems like they're just applied, given out like Halloween candy. And they're basically resulting in all of these court proceedings being conducted behind closed doors, which I thought was a violation of the general principle of public court hearings.
So we do have the open court principle in Canada, and that's why I was able to observe the bail proceeding, right? So in real time, you're able to watch what's happening. If someone were to go to the courthouse and request the decision or a copy of the audio, they would be entitled to that. But again, the publication ban for a bail hearing is automatic at the request of the accused and can be granted if it's at the request of the prosecution. So it's not automatic in that sense. It is meant to be a protection for the accused. And sometimes, we had a recent case which involved a man who ran over a police officer, and the police officer died. And there was a lot of speculation by politicians about what happened, people rushing to judgment. And the defense lawyers in that case actually requested that part of the publication ban be lifted, so that more information was available to the public, so that there'd be less of this rushing to conclusions. And in that case, the court denied it. It's a procedural kind of, and it doesn't affect the rest of the trial. And also it lifts automatically once the matter resolves. So when Dena goes through trial, or if she pleads guilty, or if the charges are withdrawn for some reason, then we will have access to the evidence that was led and the reasons for that decision.
Okay, that's amazing. And I would say it's amazing. It's fascinating. I don't think a publication ban is at all going to help Dena Sharif in this. I think it's actually going to hurt her. But are we allowed knowing who requested it in this particular case, or is that also subject of a ban?
I would play it safe and
okay.
and
not answer. She's still detained. She has not yet been granted bail.
Correct.
When is her next bail hearing?
So today she was in court, and we learned that she has retained counsel for the purpose of a bail review. So you do get an opportunity, even if you're denied bail at first instance, either if your circumstances change or if there is an error in the original reasoning, you can challenge that and seek bail again. So we know that she's back in court on May 15th. I don't think that will be the date of the bail review, but we'll see. So at some point in the near future, she's going to try again.
Okay.
And it might be, I guess, worthwhile for your audience to know that in considering whether or not to grant bail, and that's assuming that there's no consent release, because a lot of times, even if someone is detained by police, the Crown prosecutor and the defense are able to negotiate terms that are mutually agreeable, and there's no argument about whether or not to let the person out on bail. In Dena's case, there was a contested bail hearing, and the JP had to consider, as part of the law, 3 grounds for bail: whether there is a flight risk, whether there is a substantial likelihood of reoffending while on bail, and sort of a catch-all, what's the impact on the perception of the administration of justice.
Now, a contested bail hearing doesn't mean they say we want to lock her up and no bail. It means we want to attach certain conditions, and they're arguing over the conditions of the release.
No, it depends. Sometimes it can be that, and other times it can be we want this person detained point blank.
And we're not allowed knowing if that's the case in this particular case.
Correct.
Okay. Now, am I allowed asking you? I don't even know if I know I only know this from the internet, so I can't get anybody in trouble. Steve Dace. Is his first name Dace? No, is it Chris Dace? What's Dacey's first name?
Chris.
Chris, okay. He's had his run-ins with Dena Sharif.
Yes.
Are you allowed to talk about this?
In fact, he has a pending peace bond application against
Peace
her.
bond is basically a restraining order, fancy talk.
Different talk, yes.
Okay. Chris Dacey, for those of you who don't know, I met him during the protest. He does some great on-the-street journalism. I don't say he gets in people's faces, but he gets on his feet and into the story. A peace bond. Can you tell me what that is before I Google it?
Sure. It's essentially a restraining order, right, in like common parlance. There's a section of the criminal code that allows, if you feel threatened, right, if there's a reasonable fear for your own safety, safety of your family, the safety of your property, you can apply to the court to have a peace bond issued. And that peace bond essentially attaches to the individual you're concerned about. It says they must keep the peace and be of good behavior. And, if they don't, that's its own separate criminal charge, breaching a peace bond.
Okay.
It's not automatic. So just because you ask for it, unless the other side agrees to sign off, they could argue, no, let's show cause. Explain to me why you need this peace bond. I don't believe you need a peace bond. And so that would be a contested matter. And that's the situation that Dacey is in with respect to Dena.
Is it public if there are other people who have a similar issue with Dena Sharif?
Yeah, it's publicly available. That information is publicly available. I'm not privy to it.
Okay, that's cool. Now, all right. So, bottom line, she's still in jail on those charges. The serial protester might have pushed her megaphone one time too many type thing, and we'll see where it goes. The next hearing, we'll see what happens after the next.
I think it's partially that, but also you sort of pointed to it when you looked at the at the police release. Assault against a police officer, right? Alleged assault against a police officer.
You want to know how cynical I've gotten now? I no longer trust police officers when they say that they've been assaulted in the resistance of arrest. We saw what they did to that old man when they pulled him over for honking his horn. I mean, but that being said,
they weren't alleging resisting arrest, though. They were alleging that she inserted herself.
Oh, I see.
Presumably during a de-arrest. Right?
Assault police officer with the intent to prevent an arrest.
Right, and not her own. It seems that someone else was in the process of being arrested and she intervened in some fashion. But the fact that police have likely been receiving complaints about Dena's, violent antics at protests and I know that they have because I've personally had to file some of them. At one point, I had a peace bond application pending as well. And nothing really was done. At one stage, she was issued a criminal caution for criminal harassment. But police have been very uncharacteristically, maybe laissez-faire when it comes to Dena Sharif. Until recently, until it seems to affect one of their own, and suddenly there's this whole set of charges that really are indistinguishable from how she conducts herself in the ordinary course of protests.
I don't want to see, this is why I don't want to get into too much gossipy stuff, but like there are some people who believe or have reason to believe or maybe suspicion that this, progressive lefty activism, which gets a very, very big pass, much more than conservative protesting, Ottawa protests, for example, that there's like inside infrastructure support for it. And so they let them get away with it until it goes one step too far. Do you have any direct or indirect experience with that as relates to Dena Sharif and that side of the political aisle and the Ottawa police infrastructure as a whole?
So on a very practical level, the convoy was embarrassing for police. The convoy deeply embarrassed police at the Ottawa level, right? They had to bring in outside forces to come handle the situation. There was a change in police chief. They were a national and in fact international joke. So that created, regardless of the feelings of individual or political alignment of individual officers, that was, that's awkward. And so I think as a result of that, there has been a more permissive approach, or almost, ignoring anything that causes grief to the protesters associated with that convoy. And kind of, this is a good segue actually to, what happens behind the scenes. So of course, you have an on the ground protest or counter protest. People don't just show up there entirely on their own, unprompted, right? There's work that goes behind the scenes. And I think that what is interesting about Dena is that she is part of a larger network of people who consider themselves activists, and who feel very disgruntled and hard done by the convoy. So her origins as an anti-convoy protester are very relevant. And kind of even in February of 2022, you started to see organizing in opposition to the convoy, which is fair game. People are allowed, and that is a legitimate form of expression. But where things got and get a bit hairy is this undercurrent of vigilantism. And vigilantism meaning people taking the law into their own hand because they feel the law isn't being responsive or law enforcement isn't being responsive. But it creates a scenario where citizens are targeting other citizens without due process and in ways that are improper. And part of how this happens in Ottawa and elsewhere throughout the country is organizing on Discord. And for those who aren't familiar with Discord as sort of an app, it is an organizational tool that allows for an extreme level of detail and information sharing. It's often used by gamers or people running D&D campaigns. It's also used in political campaigns. And there's all these functions that are conducive to organizing, right? You can create folders, share documents, real-time group chats, host meetings, live streams. You have different channels or rooms to discuss different topics. And sometimes, the different rooms may not even be aware of each other. Not everyone has access to everything. And there is a very real Discord that is linked to Ottawa, where groups of researchers contribute to dossiers about private citizens who they have labeled bad actors, right? And that could be right wing. And, it's a very amorphous concept. And again, there's no due process that attaches to that. So if you find yourself, on the wrong end of someone's perception, then these researchers can work together to collect information, right? Whether that means monitoring your live streams, digging through court records. Some of these researchers have access to information that is not is not publicly available, whether that's through professional association or workplace or a union, bureaucrats, right? So there are ordinary people, regular citizens who kind of get into this, let's search and find. And, the purpose of this, practically speaking, is to harass people and drive them to either civil or criminal issues. And, in the most extreme cases, to like mental health crises that can end in in tragic ways.
Mhm.
And so this is something that's playing out in real time, and kind of explains, I think, to some degree, the behavior of Dena, who, as you've repeatedly pointed out, right, she, in and of herself, it's not significant, but as the microcosm and the macrocosm, and how those two interact, it's noteworthy that this is going on, and quite frightening, because I know that I've been targeted.
Well, that's so you were on. I mean, one of the times you came on, it was a long one. We went through the article that you wrote on the anti-hate Canada anti-hate. What would we call it? Hate Gate or anti-hate gate? I forget what it was. And that is basically this organization that gets government funding to identify and investigate hate groups. They're the ones basically who did the hit job on Jeremy McKenzie, Diagolon, and others. Is there, and if it's public knowledge, you'll let me know. And if it's not, or if it's private, you'll let me know. Is there an interplay or an overlapping between the Canada Anti-Hate Network, which itself is a hate network, and the Dena Sharifs of the world and that side of the political spectrum, the protesting spectrum?
Yeah, I believe there is. And I can say this with some level of confidence, because some of these researchers that I just alluded to are quoted by the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And some of these researchers have links to local politicians. And you know, so yes, there is this interplay that exists, and it sounds a little bit conspiratorial, but the fact is that there appears to be a criminal conspiracy network that's operating, and it blurs the lines between activism and harassment. And an example of this, is the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. They have published guides on, how to counter protest, how to get your adversaries' events or venues canceled. And in the counter protesting guide, they refer to the use of noisemakers, right? Noisemakers like whistles. So these instructions on their face are, neutral and not necessarily problematic, but the way that they are interpreted, and when you have a group of people who are defining themselves in relation to a perceived outgroup, it eggs on really bad behavior. And then you add to the fact that you have police who are embarrassed by the convoy, who maybe are turning a blind eye to, problematic, verging on criminal, actually criminal behavior that affects a class of protesters. And the ones who are engaging in that have every reason and incentive to keep upping the ante.
Okay, I was just showing that Joel Harden video again, because it never gets old and it never stops making me sick.
After that clip, so that same day, Joel and Dena were actually engaged in conversation. This was captured on Dena Sharif's live stream. And, she was talking about, how is it this hasn't been shut down yet? There's been more than enough violence. And the irony in this is that all of the violence that I observed was coming from her that day. And, politicians, and this is relevant to Joel's alleged hate crime scenario, where, I can't disprove that he was punched in the face. You can't disprove a negative. Certainly, all of his public statements are contradictory and don't align with any of the video evidence that exists. And it's relevant to know that at the time, the provincial NDP were pushing for a protest bubble around schools and around certain drag-related events. And so him having been punched in the face, right, that would have been an excellent hook. And I think that there was no real thought put to how would that make children feel, people in a vulnerable class feel, if even a politician isn't safe, right? Like the level of fear mongering that represents is so callous. but it would have been politically expedient. And political expedience is a large part, I think, of what groups like the Canadian Anti-Hate Network achieve, because in their very explicit, they say we wear our bias on our sleeve, and that's true. But it functions effectively as a smear factory.
It's wild. Okay. Let me see. Well, is that as much as we are allowed to discuss of the gossip relating to Dena Sharif right now, as relates to these charges?
I mean, it's not really gossip. Right?
I know it's not. It's
public interest. This is a matter of public interest.
I know it's just like it's Canada's small. Canada's smaller than the States, and no, I say, nobody really knows. I don't think anybody knew who Dena Sharif was in the stateside, but they might, because
she's a meme. Of course, she's a meme. Right?
Well,
from that day, she became a meme. So of course, in a meme, you don't get to know what's behind something. But that perception issue, and the way that a split second at a protest or a snapshot in a protest can become and take on a life of its own. That's I guess specific to our information age. Maybe it's always been like that. I don't know. But it certainly affects the way that people see and understand things. And that's part of the issue with perpetual protesters. They put themselves out there. They purport to represent a group that they may not even be a part of. And it changes public outlook, sometimes in ways that reduce goodwill.
The chat is hypothesizing that Dena's alleged hate was directed against Jews. It's funny. I would have been more inclined to think it would have been directed against Muslims, because she took issue with them at the education, not indoctrination protest, where I saw her fighting with a Muslim guy, and it got heated and it got crazy. That's one of her crazy memes where she's going.
I will say, separate and apart from the alleged charges, there are public statements that she's made that target both of those identifiable groups.
See, now here we've pissed somebody off, or at least I have. Okay, no, because that's some people are saying that the only reason this is happening now to her is because she went after the Jews. I think
it's because she went after the cops.
That's what I saw. Well, first of all, so the as far as we know, the charges that she was brought up on was not that incident with that kid and the microphone. It was something totally different, or the bullhorn.
Totally different.
Okay, fine. So that
kid and the microphone and all of these, this is a pattern of behavior. This is a pattern of behavior, consistent. So there's a lot of similar fact evidence that could be raised at trial.
What chat am I reading? I'm not reading. I don't do Discord. I can't stand. I've never even looked at it. I can't stand another method of texting and whatever. I'm just reading the chat as it goes along, and some people were saying, plus a number of other people on Twitter were saying it's only because she went after the Jews, but I thought it was more she went after the cops, and that's a big problem. But now, speaking of which, what was I about to say? I had the segue to bring Diagolon into this, because I wanted to get to Trudeau's attacks on Diagolon and the demonizing of Alex Jones for endorsing Pierre Poilievre, and then the Diagolon saying Pierre's a weasel and we can get him to do what we want. You came to the defense, or at the very least, the defense of the concept of Diagolon. Are they still getting unduly pooped on in Canada, or some people are not so sure anymore, or at least I don't know. Has anything changed with respect to Hategate, Diagolon, Jeremy McKenzie, who has been exonerated in all but one of his remaining legal cases, but seems to be getting demonized still by the government?
They continue to be a useful scapegoat. And I think that there is either an inability or an unwillingness to engage in a serious way about what aspects of the podcasting or, the speech or what have you, it is a legitimate threat, and what is hysteria or completely overblown. And the idea of this is an inherently violent group, this is a militia. I think that that's been pretty thoroughly debunked, at least at this stage.
At least for anybody who's willing to listen and see. But then, meanwhile, you still got that effing moron,
Yeah, I'm flabbergasted, I think, is probably the best word, that amid all of the actual material crises that Canadians are experiencing, somehow Diagolon is at the tip of the Prime Minister's tongue. It just doesn't make sense. And I mean, Jeremy McKenzie, for example, I think the last time I was on here, we were talking about his legal battles of 5 separate cases spanning, I think, 3 different provinces. 4 out of 5 have been completely
dropped.
Dismissed.
Yeah, dropped or dismissed.
Completely withdrawn. In one of those now terminated court files, there's an active application or a motion for what's the word? Like prosecutorial misconduct, for malicious prosecution. So that's yet to be determined. And the remaining of the 4 out of 5, the remaining one is hotly contested with a series of constitutional motions. So it's not quite over yet, but I think at the end of this is going to be a real story to tell about the interplay between law and politics. And for the most part, so far, the system has done its part in operating and coming to a just result. But the process is the punishment, right?
Well, I was going to say Jeremy was held in solitary for a couple of those charges that were ultimately, if not dropped, dismissed. I just read it today, but I can't find the link now, that apparently even in that last remaining harassment case, that it's just been revealed that the government was withholding exculpatory evidence from Jeremy and Morgan, and I have to go see if I can find that and talk about it later. Wild. Well, what's your plan for Canada? It seems to be going to hell in a handbasket. Do you see it getting better? Am I sort of exaggerating as to how bad it's gotten? And what do you see as your future in Canada?
Well, I am an eternal optimist, which might be a misplaced or misguided sense of being, but nonetheless, it's where I find myself. So I am cautiously hopeful that as some of these backhanded, underhanded channels and relationships are identified and exposed, that we can seek accountability, move on, and really look for more integrity in our public officials, in our elected representatives, in the way that our institutions operate. I do know that the Ottawa Discord I referred to, there's an interesting sort of connection between law and sort of how information that's generated is used and disseminated, how some of those researchers are providing intel to lawyers involved in anti-convoy cases, how the Discord itself was enmeshed in scandal because of allegations of porn being broadcast and shared, and how that might relate to what we just witnessed with Dena's bail hearing being interrupted.
Well, I will not ask you for any affirmation or denial of this, but my theory is that it's not that easy to accidentally grant screen access to viewers in a Zoom meeting. And so if it's not one of the hosts who pulled a tube in and left their gay porn up, and I don't care if it's gay porn versus straight porn, whatever. If it's one of the court staff that left it open, that would be embarrassing. Whether or not they would then shut it down for the public afterwards or whatever. But if it was accidentally facilitated such that this could be sabotaged so as to increase the publication ban or make it more difficult for the public to obtain information, I could see that being something of a Fight Club-esque left-wing progressive activist type. I got a mole on the inside who's going to screw this up for everybody, but benefit it for Dena, in that nobody's going to get to know the charges, or there'll be mystery surrounding this entire prosecution.
I mean, I mentioned that in these Discords, you have all manner of professionals. So I don't know. I do know that the courtroom management was such that people could unmute themselves. People could turn their own video on and off. And that's not what I would expect when there are, over 100 people, close to 200 people on the line, because that's just unwieldy. So there are ways for hosts to shut down those functions, and that did not happen.
Now, let me see. There's a super chat here, and it looks like a question that you might be able to answer, Caryma. Didn't Dena terrorize families with children at the mall around Christmas time who were waiting in line to see Santa? If so, were any charges filed for that? I have no knowledge of that. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. So that was at Bayshore Mall. And there was an indoor mall protest that did go by Santa. Terrorize, I suppose, is in the eye of the beholder. But I guess, if you're there for a family outing and, you're suddenly surrounded by screaming adults, that's not, Santa himself can be scary enough for some children. So it's not great or conducive to a good family time. But yeah, that was her. And I don't believe any charges came about as a result.
Agent Patent in our vivabarneslaw.locals.com community says, Viva, Clyde do something extensively analyzed Diagolon and mentioned you near the end of his program. I'll watch it, but I'm not getting involved in infighting between Diagolon and Clyde. I have no problem with Diagolon. I like Jeremy. You get enough people together. I get shit and I get mean tweets from members of, people who associate themselves with the PPC. There's a lot of people. You're going to get a lot of differing things. So I like Jeremy. I trust Jeremy. I think Jeremy has been greatly wronged by the Canadian government. And I'm not interested in getting involved in any infighting. Clyde does good work, and that's it. There was another question in our barneslaw.locals.com. Viva, this manufactured blame the victim for the violence scenario at protests reminds me of the Billboard Chris. Remember how the police were trying to remove and even blame Billboard Chris for the violence instead of dealing with those who are attacking him? That's from Roostang. Well, there's no question about that. That's the tactic. It's the Tommy Robinson treatment. His presence is provocation because the violent protesters that would react violently to his presence make his presence the problem. So they punish the victim instead of the victimizers. There's no question about it. Caryma, what do you have going on in the near future?
Well, the weather's getting nice. Summer is approaching. So I plan on spending time outdoors at as many rallies as I decide to go to. And
I don't want to jinx anything, and I don't want to put bad juju in the universe. I mean, you're easily identifiable. You go to these protests, you're relying on somebody not being a fucking nutbag and, smacking you over the head with something.
Yeah, and it's happened a few times. And I fortunately, because of my legal training, am able to seek recourse. There are limitations, obviously, but I'm pretty consistent about doing that, which is helpful. But I'm also working on a project, Protest Mania, which is sort of drawing out some of the themes and patterns and lessons from the past 3 years of people protesting. And so that's something that I am working on and hoping to have ready by the fall.
I'm just sending it. I got a notification from James O'Keefe. Hold on. How do I do this? Cancel this. Cancel. Cripe. I don't know what I just did. James O'Keefe just released his dropping video. There's been some drama where I think there's been people trying to sabotage James O'Keefe prior to the release of this. So I'm going to check that out afterwards. So that's, look, the legal recourse and going after people is dealing with the problem after it happens.
This is true.
Do you anticipate at some point, are you going to just stop going to these things because you can no longer even do what you want to do there without you becoming part of the story?
I'm a Taurus. So it will take me a while to get to that threshold. I think I am an innately stubborn person. But yeah, I obviously prioritize my safety and well-being. So it's a case-by-case, situation-by-situation assessment. And yeah, I think that as I am able to kind of put out what I've learned from this so far, there's a natural evolution that I see. I don't want to jinx that, but day by day.
Caryma, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, that you wanted to say, or anything that you want to say that I didn't think to ask?
No, I think that we covered a pretty broad spectrum of stuff. So I appreciate you having me on.
No, it's amazing, and I seen it. Like I know what I think of Deana. I have not seen that firsthand evidence of a lot of the more. It's subtle violence, pointing a thing. You're not punching someone in the face, but I've seen her pulling hair, and then you never know who started the fight, smashing the bullhorn. You don't know who initiated it. That using her kid as a weapon is terrible. And I was going to even ask, your title today. Hold on a second. My title today is totally incoherent. Serial protester Dena Sharif arrested and denied bail. More court madness in Canada. Viva Frei live. That's not incoherent, or at least not.
I think that's a straightforward sentence.
It's not more incoherent than normal. Caryma, I'll call you afterwards and I'll say our proper goodbyes. I'm going to take the after party over to Locals because I want to watch James O'Keefe's most recent expose, and I'll watch it with our Locals community, and we'll live react at 6 o'clock. The podcast that I did with the Unusual Suspects is going to premiere. Thank you, sir. The shipment is coming. I have no idea what's going on, but there was this apparently I needed to get this right now. Thank you, sir. So 6 o'clock, the Unusual Suspects. I talk about the Trump contempt ruling, and it's a good show. So check it out on YouTube. Caryma, where can people find you?
I'm available on Twitter at Caryma Rules. That's how I put my name here. And on Instagram at Caryma Sa'd.
I'm going to put it to a vote before we leave. Caryma Sa'd, Caryma, thank you for coming on. And please, as this develops and hopefully the publication ban gets lifted so we can talk about it, I'll see whatever I can surmise from the interwebs and relay to the general public.
Thanks so much.
All right, go. Have a good day. Everybody, I'm going to give you the link to the tweet because that's what we're going to do. We're going to do an after party on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But I need to get to the tweet of the video, which we're going to watch. And I'm going to end today's video with something funny. Hold on, I'm going to get this. Bada bing, bada boom. Everybody, here's the link. My title's incoherent. Come on, people. Come on. And it's an interesting update. I can understand why this is going to be limited, not relevance, but of limited interest to a specific crowd. But I feel bad for that kid, and I'm not saying that to be funny. My daughter's D&D group meets on Discord. I don't know what is D&D? Oh, Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. I feel bad for her kid. She was using her kid as a pawn for a lot of it. It's terrible. Other convoy case Zoom's courts were muted by hosts. Yeah, absolutely. Seize the day. Nice to see you again. So I was testing something on Rumble. The Quartering put out a tweet that said you can't tweet with the word Rumble or super chat with the word Rumble. So I'm going to try to do it to someone else's stream afterwards. Everybody, what day is it today? It's Wednesday. It seems to me that I had a stream tomorrow with somebody. Oh, crap. I forgot who I think. Anyhow, I'll be live tomorrow. Stay tuned. I'll be dropping a short video this afternoon of Justin Trudeau. And, oh, my goodness, that guy, Greg Fergus. I'm going to save it all. I'm going to save it all for the vivabarneslaw.locals.com after party. Come on over if you're so inclined. And if you're not, I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to have fun over there. Locals, bada bing, bada boom. So thank you all. I'm going to end on YouTube, and I'll see you tomorrow if you're not coming. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. YouTube is over.